Hello, my friends, and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. You see, in a war, anything could be possible, and you blame the other side. That's how it works. Why? Because it is kill or be killed, and this is a serious situation where nations disappear, slavery is instituted, people are disappearing, and so on. So when people say, well, we have the Geneva Convention, I have little doubt that those guys take care of or read the Geneva Convention requirements or policies or stipulations. Why? If you think that I have 20 people attacking my house, do you think I'm going to follow the Geneva Convention, whatever? I'm going to defend myself with everything I got, because it's myself, it's my family, the loved ones. So the same with a country. Do you think that those guys will say, oh, we're not going to use this kind of weapons because it's the Geneva Convention? Really? maybe in a sterile environment, absolute environment, not in a real environment. And the real environment is you have a lot of hatred, you are hungry, you are upset, you're tired. Whatever news you got from home, whatever news you got from fellow soldiers, whatever you've seen, you didn't sleep much, and so on. All these things play a part in your behaviors, in your decision. And believe me, you're not in a same state of mind when you are under that kind of pressure as right now. A glass of wine, pretend to be intellectual and all that, okay? Pretend. So what do we have here? We have here one side claiming that the other side used chemical weapons, 500 times or something. Now the other side says, no, you guys used chemical weapons, and now you just want to frame us. You want to have a false flag operation and claim that we are going to use chemical weapons, and the other guys are saying, no, you have them, you use them. Well, the fact is, if we are to look at the situation, both used chemical weapons. Now, if you think that depleted uranium shells are not chemical weapons, then why don't you just Google it? Okay, take some of your time and Google, for instance, cancer cases statistically in former Yugoslavia before NATO, the good people, attacked Yugoslavia, and after. And you're going to see the cases surge about 1,000 times or something like this. You go and check. And if that's not enough for you, I can give you another place to look into, and that is Iraq. Yeah, the same good people, NATO, attacked Iraq and used depleted uranium shells. So why don't you look over there to the rates of cancer after and before these guys brought freedom and democracy to Iraq. So that depleted uranium, even though this guy said, no, it's a minuscule, in great or big quantities, they will have a negative effect on the society, people, and life in general. Don't believe me? Do those little searches. Now we have here an article, actually, coming from Ukrainska Pravda, and they tell us that actually the Russians, right there, conduct 465 chemical attacks since beginning of full-scale war, dynamics growing. So the Ukrainians who used and received depleted uranium shells from the United States of America and from Great Britain said, we know what, the Russians used it. I am 99% certain that the Russians used it, but we know that you used it for sure. And you said yes. Why? Because the Brits said, that's nothing. We're not going to use it against us. We're going to use it against you. But if someone uses it against us, then that's a chemical attack. Against you, not a chemical attack. Against us, definitely a chemical attack. Now, we have also an incident where the Ukrainians were bragging that they poisoned some Russian military, some troops. I covered that in an article about 3 months ago or so, and I read the conventions regarding chemical weapons use, and poisoning military personnel or civilians also falls under the use of chemical weapons. The Ukrainians were very happy about it. That's how I know about it. So the Ukrainians have depleted uranium shells that they use. That's one. They poisoned, and they were applauding that action in Crimea. Give you more details. Okay, there were some 2 little girls that did it, and so on, and another 2. That's great, they said. That means you promote that. Now, 2 examples, and they said the Russians have been using. So if you claim moral superiority, then that means you should not do it. But you did it, and you point a finger to the other ones. The same as the rape. Rape is bad, but when your uncle is doing is not as bad or something. Now, those are not values or principles. Those are selective values and selective principles, which is no values and no principles. So look at these guys, because I have the Russians coming back and say, wait a second, these guys want to frame us. They want to conduct a false flag operation, chemical weapons, and blame us. Remember, this article right here, came today, Wednesday, the 27th of December, 2023. And this one right here, Sputnik, Ukraine plotting false flag with chemical weapons, warns Russian Foreign Ministry. So what's going on here? They both point their finger at the other side. So Moscow believes that Ukraine may be cooking up an anti-Russian false flag operation with the use of Western-made poisonous substances, and quote, with the aim of pinning the blame on Moscow for the usage of such chemical weapons. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Fantastic Maria Zakharova cautioned. Quite possibly, and I'm quoting, another anti-Russian provocation is being set up employing Western-made poisonous substances in order to launch a new campaign within the United Nations structures and throughout the global media to accuse our country of the allegedly deliberate use of chemical weapons, end quote, Maria Zakharova stated. Now, let's look at this way. I don't know who's going to use it or who's not. I think that already both of them use them. Remember, that's white phosphorus as well. Someone, if I remember correctly, did it. All right, but we can say it because I know some certain entities are allowed in self-defense, if I remember correctly. It's a country in the Middle East. I can't remember the name. Maybe you remember. That use white phosphorus against those. Okay, and in self-defense, it seems like some can do it. Nobody else, though. So I know the Ukrainians use some other little things, weapons over there provided by the Western bosses, or one actually, but anyway, that one is shackled by another one, and the interests that reign supreme over there. So in the, let's say, in a logical conversation and logical discussion, you always think of, you try to find out who did what, you would think who benefits. That's the first question. And you would think, okay, let's say the Russians are, why should they use, let's say, what help would Russia would get from using chemical weapons? The only thought that I can think is they're evil. Because they're winning. So someone who's losing is more inclined than someone who's winning to cheat. Because look at the sports. In sports, when a team is losing, that team usually, tries to cut corners, do some illegal stuff, grabs you by the balls, elbow you in the teeth, and so on. Now the other ones pretend to be a little bit more virtuous because they're winning. That's why they sometimes are more entitled to be gentlemen. But if the roles would be reversed, it's hard to remain a gentleman, if you were to begin with, when you're losing. That's when you have values, you have principles, and that's what you are. But otherwise, it's just a garbage. So I think that Ukraine actually would use chemical weapons more than the Russians, since the Russians objectively are winning, at least in the last few months, if not just looking over the map. It doesn't mean that the Russians would not use them. It doesn't mean. But if I were to pick who would be more desperate using them, it would definitely be Ukraine. Not the Russians, but it doesn't mean that the Russians cannot do it or would not do it. Probably not, because they're winning. Why would they do it? But again, there are certain orders that are made on the territory on a local area. You have a commander that reaches a point, gets berserk, gets crazy. His girlfriend, send him a letter saying that she now is with his best friend. So he's gonna say, I'm gonna do whatever, and he's going to switch his anger towards poor Ukrainians when his girlfriend is a lady of the night all of a sudden, or maybe he did not know at that point. So the same. You have local decisions. I don't think Putin has to employ something like this, since he's not in the courts doing rope-a-dope. But the Ukrainians or NATO is at this point kind of like getting to a rope-a-dope. All right, my friends, this is it. Some want to frame someone, and in the past week and a half, I read some articles where the Ukrainians or the Western media were claiming that the Russians are using drones, and from the drones with chemical bombs and grenades. That's in the past week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. It's like it's not impossible that the Russians started doing that. But why would they, since they were winning? Maybe it's a localized situation, but so can be for the Ukrainians as well. Again, remember, the first victim of war is truth. They both lie, more or less, but they all lie, more than usually. So thank you very much for being with me again today. I'm waiting to see, the Western beautiful people claiming the Russians used the chemical weapons, like for instance Bashar al-Assad of Syria. Remember those chemical weapons used? Or maybe like, what's his name? Saddam Hussein, who had those batches from where? From the Western countries. He had chemical weapons from the Western countries that he used, I think, against Iran and his own people. So, okay, maybe the big, a little bit smaller. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.